What are some of the most interesting nanobot weapons and technology in 40k? That's what I'm here to tell you about today. From the kroot that dined on too many tasty scarabs, to the Dark Age macrohammer and its micro warp portals, or the sharp use of nanobots by the Tau to help them defeat the tyanids. So, welcome heretics to another 40k video as we stare into the timeless depths of the warp, where all stories are already written. Now witness 40k forbidden knowledge. First is a tantalizing line of a weapon employed by the Men of Iron during the cybernetic revolt that we get little further information on. A omniphage swarm stripping flesh from 1 billion bones in the blink of an eye. And what about the Necrons and their bug helpers, the scarabs? The Sortek dynasty expands into Tau space and invades the kroot-held world of Karok. Though the kroot win the first engagements, their attempts to dine upon the living metal of their victims has hideous results as a nano-scarab plague sweeps through their ranks. The kroot really will chow down on anything, it appears. So what about the ever-evolving tyanids? They are going after the Tau in this next excerpt. One by one, the fleshy tyrannid vessels fell into themselves, rotting and falling away, like a piece of fruit decomposing in a matter of seconds. Before the hour was out, the bioships had disintegrated entirely. The countermeasures the Earthcast had made, explained Ovessa, had been a suite of self-replicating poisons. The necrotizing agents had been on time delay released in order to ensure they were fully taken inside the High Fleet before activating. The vector of transmission had been the bodies of the Earthcast scientists themselves. They had imbibed the poisons as their last act upon Violos. Once their bodies were broken down into the digestion pools, the bacterial codes they had locked within themselves infected the air itself. As Ovessa had hoped, the Tyranids had even stripped most of Violos' atmosphere away to fuel their further conquest. In doing so, they are doomed themselves to a swift and painful death. And Ovessa himself, it's worth noting, is kept alive by micro-drones of his own invention, a very cunning way to defeat the Nids. So what about the Dark Eldar, who are bedeviled by the Glass Plague? Could tiny robots help them with that? Naturally, the Glass Plague had gone on to be weaponized and used in many guises, occasionally re-emerging naturally as a rogue mutation that temporarily defied the common antiviral agents before they could be adjusted. The strain that had been released inside the palace was an obscure one. Several quarts of it had been concealed in liquid form inside the gift, a stone urn designed to release it as an aerosol when triggered. The black smoke they had seen came not from the explosion, as some had supposed, but from the virus-battling antiviral agents in the air of the palace. In this case, the antiviral agents had failed, and those without their own inoculations of defensive nanophages had fallen prey to the vitrifying plague. The viral helix is highly mutable, a living thing seeking to spread and flourish to overcome the barriers to its growth. The protection they had against the Glass Plague was a physical thing, tiny machines that destroyed the virus before it could grow. It was only a hope that you could help it grow fast enough to overwhelm the machines, but it was the best hope we could find. Now to the Iron Thorn. It appeared that the inhabitants of what came to be called Iron Thorn had been few and found themselves completely trapped in their subrealm by the cataclysmic damage inflicted on the labyrinth dimension during the fall of the Eldari. Some emergency or critical shortage of resources had forced them to take desperate measures to ensure their survival. In the end, either by accident or design, they had introduced a form of aggressively replicating nanomachinery into the environment of their subrealm. By the time the portals, the Iron Thorn had been forced open by Vex forces, no one could tell how long the tiny machines had been at work, or what their original purpose had really been. It was only apparent that some weird strain of accelerated machine evolution had occurred over the centuries in Iron Thorn. The practical outcome was that the nanomachines had gradually converted almost everything in the subrealm to a skeletal framework of pure iron. The original inhabitants of Iron Thorn had survived after a fashion, although the curious machine half-life they exhibited bore little resemblance to that of their previous forms. The tyrant's warriors had ruthlessly hunted down the ferric abominations and exterminated them wherever they could be found, but the altered beings had refused to remain dead. Eventually Vect had nominally incorporated the subrealm into Kamara, simply to save face, and sent his frustrated Arkans elsewhere to conquer more rewarding lands. Ironthorn had become another of the many strange subrealms of Kamara. They were generally shunned by the citizens of the Eternal City. Expeditions that entered such places were normally well armed and of short duration. Now for a very cool weapon from the Dark Age of technology, the macrohammer. These puissant archaeotech weapons are thought to date back to the Dark Age of technology. However, thus far they had only been discovered in a long-lost city cache hidden amongst the ruins of the war world of Zaith. The disciples of Thule seized the majority of the weapons, though a few have found their hands into other members of the machine cult in the Coronis expanse. Glowing with circuit runes, the ancient tech relic mounts a suitably large hammerhead covered with nano-sized warp portals, which burst open on contact. The impact of the portals creates intense, localized warp disruptions, causing micro-explosions which devastate the enemy. Like many human designs, its visage is intended to intimidate and cower all who would stand before the righteous might of the Imperium and the God Machine. And from Rogue Trader into the Storm, and I'll think to say here my favourite example, where we get data-addicted nanobots looking for their next big data hit. Tech Priest from Samek, a sect of the Dark Mech. This forged world near the Hadix anomaly provides support for traitors. A colony of the nanoscopic robots called Simuloptera has remarkable adaptive and regenerative properties. Scholars theorize that Simuloptera may have been an experiment in forbidden medical technology before Samek's immersion in the Hadix anomaly. Whatever their original purpose, these machines took on an enigmatic intelligence through prolonged immersion in the warp. The hives of these machines subsist on organic refuse, consuming the dead and the living without much care for any differences. A colony can produce a visually indistinguishable replica of anything it comes into contact with, and more importantly, anything in the memory of creatures that it consumes. Simuloptera are incapable of producing organic speech, but can control vox signals to emulate any voice patterns in their memory. This ability, combined with their obscurity, makes them a coveted tool of espionage and assassination. However, the machine's motives are poorly understood, and bargaining with a hive can be even more difficult than locating one on their native Samek. The most effective enticement appeared to be the opportunity to absorb memory patterns of new creatures and technology. Rumours suggest sacrificial offerings of navigators and well-travelled void explorers meet with the most frequent success. Some theorists use this to infer an interest in warp currents and interstellar data, but this machine shows a strong aversion to exploration and travel. While a colony may leave Samek temporarily as part of an unscrupulous pact, they always seem drawn to return once their purpose is fulfilled. A colony can take on the appearance of creatures and objects hundreds of times larger or smaller than its actual mass by changing its density. So, that's the last example I have for you today. Know any more? Has one of the other factions got some sort of technology that would fit into this bracket? Comment down below.